Right, so the way that we've made some advances here is that we now have a pipette tip. So it's this little beastie on the left-hand side here. And when I click the pipette icon next to a tube, that pipette tip will go over the, the, the tube in question. When I click the down arrow, a droplet will form, and when it hits the bottom of the tube, then it will increase the volume within the tube. So if I click on the little pipette guide here, press the down arrow, then we start getting some liquid being dispensed into the tube. If I press the top arrow, then we'll remove liquid. Obviously, we can't go beyond 0, so I can keep pressing that and it's not going to take things to less than 0. We can prove that by adding another aliquot, and this will take the volume up like it did before. So the key features of this are this guide, sending the pipette tip to the place that it needs to go, and then the formation of this droplet, and then some way of detecting that droplet so that we can increase the volume in the tube. So the first thing to have a look at is the pipette tip. This is uh, a, just an empty game object with a cylinder which is going to act as the plastic portion. It has a material on it that makes it look clear. But I've added an extra little empty game object right at the end of the piece of plastic. So if we actually have a look at the plastic, and then you can see that I've made this little empty game object called droplet point. And that's the point at which I want to instantiate the droplet when I press the down arrow. The down arrow, of course, is held on a canvas which is attached to this tip. So this is very, very similar in structure to the tube. Remember that the tube has a canvas on it. The canvas has a panel, and on the panel we used to have the arrows going up and down. Um, those arrows are now placed on the pipette tip. On the tube, the major modifications are that we now have a drop detector. This is an area, it's actually a cylinder where I've turned off the mesh renderer. If I switch the mesh renderer back on, you can see where it is. That cylinder has a collider which acts as a trigger, and that trigger is going to be set to detecting the droplets. And when the droplets fall and hit that trigger, then we'll get the volume being added to the tube. The other thing that I've changed is I've taken off the up and down arrows from the tube and have replaced that with this little pipette icon here. So this button here is the one that is going to trigger something in a script called Pipette Guide. So let's have a look at the script. So the Pipette Guide one is attached to the tube, and what it does is when you press on this purple button, it runs this function, direct tip to tube. The first thing that this function does is go off to the scene and find the pipette tip. So it finds it by name. Of course, it could find it with a tag instead if that's what you wanted. And then it moves that tip to where the plastic is. So that's why we need the reference to the plastic, but above it. So at a Y height of 4 above. Now, obviously, we can get a bit more sophisticated about this. And in fact, what we really want is that pipette tip to be moved to the meniscus or just above the meniscus of the liquid. So in a later iteration, we'll get a little bit more sophisticated about that. And then another important thing about moving the tip is that the tip should record which tube it's over. So the 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 tip has a script on it called pipette action, And within that there is a variable called active tube, and we're going to make that variable equal to the game object that is attached, or that has this script attached to it. Let's go and have a look at that Pipette action script. It's attached to the Pipette tip. The suck up and dispense functions respond to the up and down arrows. When you press the up arrow, you're basically using that script that we already have in liquid in tube, the one that removes the 100 microliters. And remember, this is why we need to know which tube it is we're over. The tip, which is going to run, which holds this script, needs to know which tube it should be performing that function in. Dispensing, on the other hand, it's not necessary for the tip to know which tube it's in over. All that's really necessary here is that a droplet is instantiated. So that droplet is made just from a droplet prefab. That prefab is literally just a sphere. So if we just go to the droplet prefab, that's all it is. It's just a sphere. And that droplet is instantiated at the droplet point. And that's why we have a reference to the droplet point. That's why we made the droplet point. So for this script, we need three things to come in. We need to have the droplet prefab, we need to know where the droplet point is, and we need to be able to know which is the active tube. And that knowing the active tube is important for the sucking up operation. The sucking up operation, as I mentioned, will just run the removing 100 microliter part of the 100 microliter function in the liquid in tube script. But we need to do something more sophisticated with the drop detector. Remember, there's a drop falling down. Actually, one thing I didn't mention about that droplet was that we have a rigid body on it and make it subject to gravity, so that when it's instantiated, it falls. And it falls onto this drop detector. And this drop detector has a drop detector script on it. And that drop detector script is set to trigger when something collides with it. Probably go get a bit more sophisticated here and make it so that it's limited to a droplet colliding. So if the name of the thing that's collided is droplet, then go ahead and do this. And that will just save it from interacting things that have just bumped into it and aren't the droplet. But what's going to happen is that as soon as the droplet has hit the trigger, the script is going to trigger the add 100 microliter function in the liquid in tube script. So therefore we need a reference to where that script is located. It's located on the liquid portion, remember. So here's the liquid portion and there's the script, liquid in tube. And once we've done that, we'll destroy the droplet. So that all leads to us being able to get this to work. So I click on here, it directs the pipette tip. I click on here, it instantiates. The detector's hit, the droplet is destroyed, the liquid increases. This way round, we're sucking up, but we know which tube we're over. So if we were over this tube, and we've got some liquid in this one over here, but we're over this one on the left, when I press the up button, it's going to take the liquid from here and not from the one on the right, because it knows which tube it's over. When you're making the droplet, it doesn't matter that you know which tube you're over, because gravity and the game's engine will do all the instantiation over the right tube and then detection of the droplet in the right tube. Okay, so that's quite nice. We've got a bit of flow now. We're able to direct the pipette. We're able to actually have our controls on the pipette. One of the things that I've introduced here is this idea that the addition has this intermediary droplet. And that's something that we've used in the data generator since its inception, but it may well turn out that it's not necessary, that it's a middle step that isn't quite required. So in the next session, we'll see what happens if we don't use it. Because of course we didn't use it for the sucking up, did we? We didn't have a droplet for that. We'll also maybe try and introduce some variation to the numbers that we're pipetting out and sucking up, so that we'll actually have some control over the volume. And also we might try and make it so that the pipette movement is a little bit more sophisticated, maybe going to the meniscus of the liquid as well. So there's a few extra little things that we can do, and that will be in the next session.